The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. This is Brian from Breaking Down Security. This week is part 2 of our discussion with Stacey Cameron and Shannon Noonan on automating all of the things. We've talked a little bit about what you should do when you're automating, if it's makes some sense to automate these processes. How you explain to management why you would like to automate these things. So, we continue that discussion this week. And for those of you who are just catching us up new here, we did an episode with them last week, and it really was just one Twitch stream that we did and kind of split things up. We're still working on how to create the pacing. Obviously, people don't want an hour-long podcast times 2, so we're trying to figure out if it's worth the effort to make edits or to keep track of where things are. It may be that we'll just put up 45 minutes on the audio podcast section here, and then if you want to catch the other 30 to 45 minutes, you go check out the Twitch if you want to catch any other insights that are guests or when we were talking. It might be worth doing that way as well. Anyway, so yes. Stacey and Shannon are, they work for a consultancy that helps organizations with compliance, regulatory, some automation processes. They also, make sure that, just that people are doing what they need to do. And, so we had them on. And yeah, this was a great discussion. We actually got through a lot of the automation portion. I think in this section of the stream, we were talking about some of the pitfalls you get with compliance. Being compliance is, minimum bar for security versus, being secure means often going beyond compliance. So I hope you enjoy the audio. I do apologize. It sounds like at some points I may be popping a little bit. My stream, as I was working it out at this time, was probably topping out on the end of the volume register. So hearing me talk, there might be some clicks or pops or something like that. I do apologize. I cannot fix that post. So I am working on getting all that dialed in. I think if you go to our Twitch stream at twitch.tv/breaksec, I believe in later streams that we've done, that I've done, doing things like Try Hack Me and discussing and just chatting with other folks. I think we fixed the audio from here on out. So I'm feeling very confident about that. So hope everyone has a great week. Here's Stacey and Shannon, and be kind and be nice and take care of yourself, because you're the only you have. And have a good week. Right. Okay,
but trust but verify, the big answer to your question.
The one thing, and they've probably been burnt by this before. They come in and you give them a ream of paper, because that's what me and Mr. Betcher may have been guilty of, just, inundating the auditors with a bunch of paper that they had to look through and waste their time. So they assumed, well, they gave us a ream of paper, so they must be true. It's, it works. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, so I think in terms of automation, the difficulty is it's going to take time to get the automation in place. And if you tell your management, hey, we need to do this, and they're going to be like, well, you have 15 other things you need to do. Why do you want to do this one thing? And I think the problem that some of us have, especially maybe not senior personnel who don't necessarily understand it, is how to frame it in such a way to show cost savings over time. If we can get this, if we can audit 500 boxes with this script, that's not me spending 2 weeks auditing every individual box. And I think if we could frame it in that way, we could potentially get more automation, or maybe you could show that it is actually cheaper for you to hire a contractor or somebody on short term to come in and make the automation for you or to write the scripts for you. Has that ever been a suggestion that you've given clients or anything like that?
Yes. I come from the accounting background, right? I've always dealt with dollars and cents. You got to know your buyer. Who is your buyer and what do they need to know? Half the time your buyers are your CIOs, your CISOs, or the CFO, and they want to see costs go down and more revenue, right? So what do you have to do? Well, if time is money, I've been on calls, which all of us have, right? This call right here alone, we're probably about $1,000 call right here, just for an hour of our time, right? So if you look at it from that perspective, I'm gonna put right, I'm gonna put 20 people on a call for 30 minutes to get them to review something and explain it over and over and over again, because it's not automated, it's manual, whatever it is. Well, how much money did that call just cost? That's one thing. But it's not going to be one call. It's going to probably be 5, because the auditors didn't understand it the first time because it's the first time they saw it, or they have a new audit team. So expect it to be repeated that time, mid-year, end of year. If it's like Sarbanes-Oxley, it's all year long. You have to prove it. PCI, it's a point in time. HIPAA, it's point in time. SOC 1, SOC 2, it's all year long. So you have your auditors asking all the time the same questions over and over again. Well, I'm not explaining it once. I'm explaining it 5 different times. That's how much money that's walking out the door. So if you can explain that, and that's hard because a lot of people don't understand that concept of how much does it cost for my meeting to run, because they're not seeing the dollars and cents. They're just seeing the bodies in a meeting.
All those soft costs.
Yep. And that's just one way. Then it's all the extra hours outside of that to get that manual job done that nobody's talking about. Right?
They don't show up on a balance sheet, so it's like almost hypothetical, right?
Yeah. Well, and as you said it, Brian, some of these people in a SOC team, right? Why not automate some of this? Well, they're just so used to doing the routine and getting the job done that they forget to look outside the box and see that there's something else that they could do, because they don't know how to do it any other way. They don't know how to pause it because they're being told, I got to get it done now. I have someone to give it to. I have 5 hours to get it done. It's usually last minute. It's rushed. So it's time and money for them too, because time is money to them, right? So how much time do they have so that they can get to their kids? So if they pause and stop and look at it, what are they missing out at the end of the day? Is it family? Is it a life outside of work? What is it? So if they're used to doing a routine over and over again, they forget that, well, if I simplify this here, I may have more time over here. They're like, no, I know how to do this. Let me get it done. Now I can get to my life.
Right. So, all right, y'all work with some big companies, I'd imagine. How important is communication to the automation process? And I work for a big company. Everybody will know the name if I mentioned it, but because of OPSEC, I don't, mention it on the show, or I won't here in the stream. But a lot of times, people in my group will be working on something and then find out 2 weeks later another group is doing something very similar. And there's wasted time and effort there. So it's part of change management, ideally, because you're wanting to introduce a new process, or you're wanting to automating a specific process. But how important is communicating to people who might benefit from this, so that way we're not duplicating effort, and making sure that what works on our side will also work on their side, or, to keep from having stovepipe solutions that, only work maybe in a certain way.
Do you want to go first, Stacey?
You can go ahead. I'll jump in later.
This is my favorite topic ever, especially when I'm literally in an organization right now. Finance is doing it one way, legal is doing it another way, and security is doing it another way. And they all have to get to the same goal, and none of them are communicating. So then they hire a consultant say the security IT group will hire a consultant because they have to get it done. They need to get their environment sorted out. Legal gets mad because they weren't included, but legal doesn't understand what IT needs to get done because they don't understand the technical piece. And then finance, who's through the internal audit component, is upset because no one told them that IT was doing this. Well, why didn't you all talk before you brought the consultant in, or why didn't it get communicated? A lot of times it's people don't understand what the other teams need to get done, and they don't know how to communicate across the lines. So IT speaks one language, legal speaks another language, and finance speaks another language. And none of them know how to communicate the same language. And that may seem really weird, but it's true. Finance talks dollars and cents, legal talks laws, and IT talks technical terms. How do you get them all to speak the same language?
Well, they all have Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Stacey.
Oh, no, go ahead. You're right on it. Go ahead. I'll jump in.
No,
later.
it's like they all have the same goal, right? So they should be able to focus on that. I mean, and maybe they would work on the legal side first, and then it's like, well, the next iteration. And we talked about this yesterday. Pastry Death was talking with me about this. Scripts and automation can be an iterative process. So what works, we solve the legal problem, then we solve the IT problem, then we solve the security problem, or what have you. It just seems like you have to know what the goal is or why we're automating that, right? Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Stacey.
Yeah, so what I see is it happens when, especially as Shannon was speaking, when you have those different departments doing similar functions and all using different tools or what have you, doing it a different way. A lot of those stem from not having enterprise processes in place. You'll have, especially like you mentioned, change management. There's a lot of different ways that people do that. The ways that I've seen them done the best is when they really have all those individuals there, right? The right people there. Maybe they're not all making the decision makers, but at least they have the right people part of the process. So they have that finance and legal and engineering and operational resources. So they all have a chance to review those changes. There's also, for instance, things that you can do from an enterprise when you're looking at like enterprise architecture and what have you, when you have those types of programs in place. A lot of times you put it through all the way through purchasing or your acquisitions because if if this is how you buy, I always ask people, how can I buy stuff, right? If in your organization, what do I need to do? Do I have to get a purchase order? Do I have to go through acquisitions? Do I have a limit on a credit card that I don't have to go through to bypass any of that? So you get a lot of, so when you're trying to really figure that out, always let's follow the money, right? So that's sort of that catch-all entry point. So then, and not too many people think of it, especially when you're looking at a lot of the regulations that we work with outside of like the financial side, they don't really bring in purchasing. But it's key in certain of those areas when you have all of that within your organizations. I've worked places before at a large government organization where they knew this was an issue and they knew they had all these tools. So they created a working group just, I'll give an example, for mobile applications. So anyone in that entire organization who wanted to get a mobile application had to go through that working group and it consisted of a lot of security folks on in that working group, small working group, but any mobile application before it could be purchased had to go there for a review. And there was the 80-20 rule. If there's something we already have that's doing 80% of what you need, then we'll work when you're using that and work when using feature requests. So it saves organizations money and time, because a lot of times, a lot of these tools that you're working with, especially if you're a large enough organization, the vendors are working with you on feature requests. And you can sort of incorporate that within your process. But yeah, so I mean, it gets very and it's funny, right? So when they bring, like Shannon, when you bring that third party in and we come in and we're sitting there and I'm like, and it's because we've had a conversation with this person, that person, and that person. And sometimes you're dealing with internal politics within certain companies.
Right.
And they actually leverage your auditors or assessors or advisors to come in so they're always excited. Oh, yes, we're going to use it. We're going to get on the CIO's calendar. I can never get on his calendar, but I have an auditor here, so I can get on there now. So they'll do that. Or we're going to get on the CFO's calendar as well. And then these people who never talk to me, we say audit, so they have to talk to me. I was doing something for a client before, and it wasn't even an audit, but they labeled all the meetings audit. And from a compliance person, it just a logic person. It was blowing my mind because I'm very particular in an OCD on some of the word usage. I'm like, we're not auditing, we're assessing, but it's totally okay. I was like, I get it. If they show up for that, like people didn't know what they were coming into. It said audit, so they showed up. So I'm like, if that's how your organization works, sometimes you have to work on that on that as well. So.
And not only that, they then take it and say, if we find something, they use that as the platform. They'll say, look, I brought an expert in. I brought the SME in. And you're like, wait, I'm not. They're like, just go with it. And they told me to do this, this, and this. And you have to be very careful as you're coming in and making sure that you're not just letting them use you to get their voice out, that they're actually using what you told them to get through the door and not just trying to make their own opinions work. So it's an interesting perspective on how to get through some of these where they take advantage of the assessor and the auditor to get their voice heard.
Nice. Okay. So I actually posted up another link called kissflow.com, and they talked about preparing your automated business processes. And one of the first things, and I'll put it in our show notes here. For those of you on the audio podcast, I will put all these links in the show notes as well. So the first thing they asked about, and that was one of the things I asked about, was identifying the process owner and keeping the goal or the why in mind. The other thing they mentioned was get the history. Ask the process owner how the workflow was managed in the past. Some of the stuff we've been talking about made me think of my days when I was doing audits for hospitals, and our consulting firm used the CMMI model, 1 to 5, 3 being the baseline where everybody should be, where it's like, this is they have a process, it's documented, and it's easily repeatable by anybody. Hospitals rarely made it to level 3. It was usually around a 1 or a 2, 2 being, we have a process, but it's ad hoc. It's not documented. Documentation was like level 3, but, the get the history, remember the goal of the automation. Why are you trying to save time, money, tracking items better, reducing paper forms, taking work off of somebody's plate? Don't try to do all of these, just focus on primary goal or what have you. But ask the process owner how this workflow was managed in the past. Let's say I reach out to a process owner and he's like, I don't want to automate this process because, one, it's going to make me less important, or they're going to feel like they don't have any idea what this is going to do to their job if they believe that this is the one thing they do. Do you ever get any resistance? Because some of the stuff I learned in ADCAR for change management was the resistance factor, where people are going to be hesitant to make these changes and automate this. So this is going to generate a lot of resistance if you're making a lot of changes to people's workflows. How do you manage that?
Oh, I thought you were going to. Yeah, so there. Okay, I'll start and I'll let you come in. But so managing the politics is fun, right? It's the part of consulting that not all consultants get, and that's sort of when you start separating your consultants out from your some of your folks that are just specifically focused on engineering, or your analytical folks. But it's necessary because it's just is within certain organizations. So when they come in, and one of the things we like to do, and we were talking about, definitely, when you're identifying the process owner, when you're getting your history and looking at the workflow, it's understanding how they're currently doing things, and come in and reassuring them that we're not trying to turn upside down what you're doing, but we're trying to optimize and add efficiencies. And the best way to do something like that is really have them work with you for the process. These are actually some of the more fun, I'll say, engagements that I enjoy, when I can come in and, we're in person a lot, we'll whiteboard it together. So we come into the conference room, you bring in the relevant parties, and you really leverage their ideals. And it's a tactic that I use when it's almost like it's their ideal. and they're suggesting that this is the better way to do this current task. And someone has to manage the process. Someone has to implement the process. Someone has to make sure that it is still ongoing. So when you really show we're not working you out of a job, we're actually making you more efficient with your job and actually allowing you to even expand and grow because you're adding this automation. It's explaining it to them as well. So I mean, sometimes you're gonna work with different personalities, but when you really make it a team effort, then it's not someone came in and didn't like how I did my job and decided to change it and said this is what you're going to do. That rarely works. So it's more of a let's work together, and it's a teaching moment. So we teach as well as assess. So if I can teach you a better way, once I understand your current method, to date, I haven't had the resistance from that.
That's good. I'd imagine, they'll have different work to do. They'll still have to maintain the process. They'll still have to, make sure that the reports are good, that the automation, generates reports that make sense, or have to tweak things. So that, it does make sense that, I worry about, those folks that just don't want to do that because, maybe they don't like being told what to do, or, I've had issues with that in the past where people have actually resisted making their jobs easier or changing what their job was because they're comfortable in that mold or that shoe, if you will. So,
and those are the times when you actually end up going to the next level, right? So a lot of times we're coming in, we may be working with the VPs and the C levels or what have you. And then asking them to assign a leader for said task. And then now, so that's when you kind of leverage those relationships that you've built with that party. And it happens often. So when I work with certain individuals and they're like, I can do this, but I'm not going to do it until my manager says this is what we're going to do. So it's great working with them to understand what can be done, and then leveraging those executive meetings to say, hey, you have this talent in-house. They're just waiting for direction. And showing it and explaining to them where they're losing money, where they can do more efficiencies. Sometimes it comes in where when you're still leveraging that maturity model or benchmarking with other industry standards, or even other companies within that same marketplace, and they can understand what people are doing and where they end up. So you leverage that executive level to help you with that enforcement, and that's that in those relationships and getting that way. They're like, okay, well, if management says I can do this, then okay, and then you have that piece of, hey, you helped develop this. You have helped set your own course. So it's not like someone came in and just told you to do something you didn't want to do.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's get real. Where have you seen this done well? You don't have to name names, but did they use a tool, right? Did they buy an expensive piece of software and it paid off for them? How much investment did they make? I'm going to need some examples here.
I've seen it done well. There's certain areas, let's say some places in the hoteling industry, I've seen certain things done well with leveraging tools. Leveraging some of these processes, and the time when it works the best is if you have somebody that is you have that continuous monitoring effort. So you have someone that's monitoring these controls, or whether it's automated or what have you, to make sure that what you put in place is still being done. When it doesn't work is if you just do it once and then come back and check on it the next year and realize you only have that one chance. So where I see it work, yeah. So I've seen it work not as well. I've seen it work semi well. Everyone has a chance to do it. I've seen things work the best in organizations where they had like when they actually commit the resources to compliance and security. That's where it works well. Not places I go in and there's no compliance department, because I've done that as well. So
that's usually when we never end up leaving too.
Good for business.
So you're saying that they actually need an engineer on staff in the compliance, maybe in the compliance department, or dedicated to, maybe not dedicated, but dedicate hours to keeping this automation flowing, right?
Yes and
So
no. Yes and no on that. You need the right partnerships. So I worked, and actually with Stacey, we worked with an organization that we were able to work with teams, and we partnered with them properly, that they were able to do certain tasks. They understood the reason why it needed to get done. They understood the purpose behind it, and they understood that it was going to make their lives better. So they worked with us. If you don't have the right partnerships, then yes, I could see an engineering need to be on your team. But if you have the right partnerships with the teams, and you can help, you can be a priority. Because think of it, if you don't own it, right? And this is where we all see this in security. You have these teams, the CISOs, that are telling all these teams to do these things, and then they're like, well, why aren't you getting it done? Like, I don't own the people to get it done. So how am I supposed to implement something if I don't have the team to get it done? I have to rely on you to do the work. So really, you own it. But their priority list is not the CISO's priority list. Their priority list is whatever their boss is telling them to do. And if it never gets involved or in tune to what needs to get done, you're never going to get done. So you need to make sure your buyers or upper management, just Stacey was saying, someone is making you a priority and partnering with you to get something done. Otherwise, you need the teams to get the work done yourself.
Communication. So that's that communication across all departments, whether they're assigned to the team or just assigned as a resource to communicate with, to make sure that you really understand what's going on. So you have that communication, you have that executive leadership and executive support. And then you have somebody that is actually designated and assigned as those process owners. I literally went somewhere, and I'm not even going to say where I was, but there was someone who didn't own a very large security part of their of what they did, and I found that interesting that there was no owner at the time. They have one now, but those types of things get lost if there's no one wanting to be responsible for it. They'll get lost. So
Right.
don't necessarily have to have them on the team, but you definitely talk to them.
Yep.
is there a guide or a cheat sheet or something? Like I deal a lot with Windows logging, and there's actually something online called the Windows logging cheat sheet, right? So is there a compliance automation cheat sheet? Is there a change management automation cheat sheet out there? Like, I don't know where to get started.
Yeah, a lot of times, especially if you're thinking from a compliance standpoint and you have that particular regulation, you can find a lot of checklists, I would say, that at least will get you started. So it almost gives you an initial assessment, so you can look at
with
your
automation in mind, though.
No, that's not going to have automation in mind. So I have not seen something that has automation in mind. I've seen it separate, right? So if you're talking about change management, there's going to be a whole bunch of things to talk about automation there. If you're talking about IAM solutions, there's going to be automation there. If you're talking about things like SIM or centralized event management type things, there's going to be automation there. I have not seen one collaborative list or comprehensive list that says this is automating everything.
And that also gets back to is everyone has a favorite tool. So you're going to have one compliance team say that they like all these tools, and you're going to have one engineering team that say they like all these tools. So it's very difficult to get that one list because everyone uses a different tool. Scanner.
I see it from an MSSP standpoint, or managed service providers. They all give you a one-stop shop.
Yep. It's the solution is going to be fairly bespoke, right? Every group is going to have their own way of doing something, unless you're leveraging some kind of automation platform that everybody uses. But it would seem to me it'd be a very bespoke kind of solution depending on what your company is, and every company is going to be different. I would imagine. So
yeah,
well, it would seem then, if that's the case, that it might be worth it to get someone on staff that may be good at automation or has done it in the past, and you hire them, maybe even a contractor for 6 months or whatnot,
right,
to come in and figure out all the processes that you have on your GRC team, and and just let them go and automate as much as they can, right? And let them do what they do. Might be money well spent, because if they start automating half of the work that's out there, and you can just choose your own adventure. Well, I'm making the choices, but all the reading, all the time, right, in between the beginning and the end of the chapter is all like takes a second, right? And so I think it might be money well spent, depending on your organization, to hire a consultant or somebody that's good at automation, that's good at assessing what you might find valuable in repeatable tasks.
Absolutely. I agree.
I agree with that.
We got developers and security people are kings of automating things. We talked about this earlier. We don't want to have to, type commands in continuously. So no. We're efficient workers. We're not lazy. We're not lazy. There's a difference.
Simplify. They simplify. They make it
We're
easy.
simplifiers. Yes.
They have
So
an easy red button.
That's right. So we had a comment from Pastry Death in our chat about the contact stuff. He said when I was in corporate training, we had a concept called Hourglass. All the people on the ground had a single point of contact, and that point of contact relayed the information to the proper managers and vice versa. That single point of contact held the knowledge and therefore could make decisions about the whole picture instead of getting redundant issues. And Pastry also said, I feel like automation is also something that needs its own group of maintainers. I hear a lot of horror stories about technical debt, juniors getting put on legacy code that they don't understand what is going on. Automation needs to be updated. It's just like code, right? So, it can't, if it gets stale or, maybe it needs to be updated, some of these things like Python scripts will use dependencies that go, out of date, or, if you're using a script in Python 2 and it needed to be migrated to Python 3, your automation is going to suffer if you can't, migrate that, and you're going to have to create something from scratch. So, good call outs there, Pastry. It's also important from a management perspective to realize it's not always okay to give somebody more tasks than that just because they've simplified their job. That's correct. But Shannon and Stacey, you mentioned having somebody who could be a point of contact for those things. I see it a lot in my organization and other organizations in the past where we end up with the "and" title. So I'm a lead developer and I'm also doing collateral duties. And so I'm working 40, 50 hours a week as the developer over here. And now I have to do another 10 to 15 hours. Is that a culture thing? So if we have somebody who's dedicated to updating these things, it's a rhetorical question. They should be doing this, but do you ever make recommendations like, hey, look, you can't be having this person working 50 hours and also trying to do this. This is a legitimate job that needs to have a JD connected to it. It needs to have a dedicated asset. Have you ever gone in and said, hey, you've got too much to do to have automation being a secondary task?
Yeah, I've done that directly to I usually say it to their face, right? I've looked one that's going at their face. I said, you are a risk to your organization. I was on a risk assessment. So I'm like, FYI, you're going in the report as a risk.
Yep.
And he was okay with it. Like, I didn't want to shock him with it. I didn't want to deliver a report. But I'm like, you're going in there as a risk because you're a single point of failure. He was a senior level. And your job is to go out, find these technologies, get all this automation in place. But you're coming in every day and you're sitting here and looking at audit logs. I'm like, you should have people that do that. And you have people here that can. So, but it was the beauty of that is coming back in the next year, it was fixed, right? There was a new personnel was hired. His duties were shifted to focus on, he was a CISO, to focus on his CISO task a lot more. And I saw, I love when I go someplace and they've made changes in a year. I just want to hug people, pre-pandemic time. it was a beauty for that. So coming in the next year, I can actually, I'll give you credit for, yes, you are doing these things. This says something about your organization. It says that your organization has management is listening, management is actively working. So you're reducing your overall risk within your organization because you're actually managing it. So, if you have, everyone has risk. If you don't manage them, then as an organization, you're higher risk than someone who has those same risks, but they are managing them. So when you look at the big picture, you're going to see this one's going to they're going to look better in a risk perspective because they're actually managing these risks. So those are the types of things. And so yes, you need to look at these things. You need to do them. And we see it. We see it work. We see it fail. And we usually try to learn from all those experiences and help our clients out. We're just here to help.
Right. Well, as Stacey's saying, the big areas we see this is when we come in and do a risk assessment for the company. And we're looking at risk assessment identifies people. My favorite is when we do business continuity disaster recovery. And you start saying, all right, so who are your key points of failure? And if this were to go down, is anyone able to support you if you can't get to it? And they're like, no, I'm the only person that knows how to do this. Immediately, it highlights the gap and the risk that's associated. And you just sit there and say, so is management ready to hear the fact that this is not going to work if all of a sudden something goes wrong? But those are like the two big areas that we see it, as well as other gap assessments that we do. But it's amazing how many times we come across it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There are far too many single points of failure in organizations, and it kind of creeps up on you over time. You don't realize until you've had complete turnover in a department, and you're like, well, he's been here 2 years. He's the or she's been here the longest, so she knows how to do all this stuff. And who else does? Well, no, nobody really. And how long has it been since we updated the automation documentation or how regular process documentation? Well, we haven't. So, that's probably a compliance finding, like, bumping the versions on your policies and procedures and everything is a regular thing that you have to do. But, so the tools may be different depending on every company, but is there any good, way or any good format that you've ever seen, the documentation for processes or automation? Because one of the 8 things they say here in the list is you should document the process or the workflow, and when you're gathering the data about the unautomated process, when you're diagramming the workflow, is there any good? I mean, is it better to be visual? Is it better to have just a sheet of paper with words on it? I mean, what works best for people?
Know your audience.
Know your audience. Okay.
Know your audience. I've seen people that, granted, no one really likes to read a document. They usually like flowcharts because if you're working with developers, they want to see the flow. They want to understand the flow. Right. They don't want to read a bunch of words. They want the guidance and they want to be told what to do and they want to understand the flow. Whereas you get your business process owners and they don't understand those diagrams. They get confused and they're like, why is there all, what's going on? What are these boxes? What's going on here? They like the words. So who's your audience and who are you trying to communicate with? And sometimes having both actually is beneficial because
I was going to say both. Yep.
Both, because you have, as we said this, you have multiple teams you're communicating with. Well, what's the language that they need to speak? And how do you centralize it and simplify it? Well, sometimes it ends up being both because you've got to get the message and communication across multiple layers.
Yeah, whatever you do, just make sure you have a central repository where all the documentation is going. That's the one that I see. It's critical. For instance, especially if people are using like Confluence and Jira or whatever wikis that you're using, it's a good tool because if I have a new person that's starting, we were talking about this a little earlier. They jump in, they're creating a new, we'll say widget. They're creating a new widget. They go into the widget creation page. And it tells me, I love if they've decided what languages that we're going to use, or if we're going to use this for this. This is the process. This is how we're going to comment and code or what have you. And this is the whole workflow that we're going to do. So they have that. My thing is making sure whatever you document, as Shannon was saying, know your audit, make it usable. And unfortunately, when you work with auditors, you don't always get that piece. They just want to see things from an audit standpoint. But the thing is, when you make the documentation usable, the auditors can use that same information. But if you ask them, they're not going to tell you that. So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, it's usable. If I have a team that's just working with widgets, then I only need this wiki for my widget team. Auditors, you can just combine, like you said, we gave them all the information. You can combine the information and they can get it. But you want to focus, when you're focused on documentation, it needs to be in a usable format. So if it's a process, an overarching management process where, you know, your engineering team doesn't need to get to the details of it, then you can write it as such. But then, you know, they have that repository where everything is, and you can use as a reference, you know, from someone that was doing things. I would go in and search our policies. How do we do this? What is our stance on VPNs? If you're managing a VPN solution, you want to make sure that you can just go and easily look up that information. So short, sweet, to the point is the best way to do it. Confusing auditor, sure, give them a long refresh picture. but
I feel
just
bad.
Know that they're going to ask you questions. If they read it, they're going to ask you questions, and now you have to go read the document you gave them.
Well, see, if I have it in 8-point font, then it will take them forever to read it. And
they'll zoom right in. It's printouts no longer exist. They zoom right in.
That's true.
And the best is when someone takes a generic policy that doesn't meet what they're doing, and they give it to the auditors, and then the auditors go, so your password policy says that you're going to have 8 characters, alphanumeric, but you're configured to have 8, and this is not happening, 6 characters and only numbers. Why are you not meeting your policy? And they're like, crap, did anyone read this before we get to the auditors?
My favorite was going and auditing hospitals, and I'd be like, well, we need an incident response plan. And they're like, oh, that's not in that. Let me get back to you, and you give it a couple days. And I was like, look, you don't have the document. You can't give me a document in 2 days and have the actual active date being yesterday. So
they implemented it overnight.
Did they? See, the problem was I was coming in to do the pre-audit. I was not the actual auditor. I was the guy coming in to help them, but they always treated me like I was the enemy. And I was like, look, I'm just trying to help you find what work you need to do. So if you don't have an IR policy, just tell me. We'll mark it down as a thing to do. Don't try to, sandbag me for 2 days and then have something, like what Stacey said, really generic policy, or, like Shannon said, generic policy, with no real teeth in it, because you aren't enacting this. The policy is great. The process is great, but you actually haven't tested it. You haven't done anything with it. You don't know how it's going to screw up your system. So, yeah.
And that goes back to that's a great point you just raised, is the fear of any form of an auditor or assessor coming into insight. We usually go in, we have to literally say, guys, we are part of your team. We will help you become successful. If you give us the information, if you hide it from us, we can't help you be successful and make sure you get through the door the right way. And it's amazing how many people fight that because they're so afraid that someone's going to say there's an issue and that they're going to have a repercussion down the pipeline. So it's that top-down approach of how do you communicate to them and get them to understand that you're part of the team and you're going to make them successful versus that you're just going to highlight all of their flaws.
Yep.
I usually start with the first statement come in. So I'm not your auditor this time. I'm on your side. We're on the same team. Matter of fact, we're going to help your audit be easier, but you have to tell me everything.
That's right.
So we're on the same team. Yeah. Yes. So you got to come in and establish that trust first. And then this is what we're going to do. And usually, it's a really good response. I'm like, we want to figure out, we want to air all our dirty laundry now before we get to the auditor. So I've gone places, especially you get someone they already know to say, yes, tells them everything. And then there's a flood of information. And I'm just like, okay. Yep. But, and then in certain places, they're warming up, they're coming slowly but surely, but they're able to do it. But I always tell them it's that. And then, we have that shared enemy, which is the regulator, right? So I'm like, yeah, let's be mad at PCI together. Why are they making you do this? And, we're going to be mad. We're going to be the same team. We're going to blame them for everything. I wouldn't, I'm not telling you to do this, but the standard says, so we got to, they're going to come back. they're going to come back and ring you for this, so we better do this. They'll be our enemy.
So one of the things I think Shannon asked me was, do we have leeway to discuss other issues or difficulties, in terms of compliance and change management? Your discussion there with the 8 characters and the upper lower number special and some of the issues that we've had with PCI, Mr. Betcher and myself, have been something legendary. I actually think PCI hopefully is moving in the right direction on this, but do you ever, from a compliance point of view, worry that compliance is lower than actual security? Because that our thoughts, well, at least my thoughts were, I don't know, Mr. Bretcher can echo this, was I always strived for higher than compliance, because compliance is like here, damn you, overlay, and then like security's up here. So PCI is like 8 characters, upper lower number special, and it's like, no, we should be doing better than that. We should get rid of the 8 character thing. Just make it, an absolute minimum, but we should encourage our users to be secure, not to be compliant. Do either of you have thoughts on this? I'll start with Stacey.
You are speaking my language now. Okay, so
Yes.
No. For those of you listening, we did a hair flip. All right. So.
I would do it, but my earbuds would fall into the ground.
So compliance and security, I always tell people, they are not the same thing. You can be compliant and not secure. You can be secure and not compliant. Compliance came for accountability purposes. People were just out here wild westing, doing whatever, not taking the right security precautions. So compliance decided to come in and say, let's give some parameters, right? But we want things that, you're going to hold people to this standard. In some cases, you're going to cut off services, or you're going to fine them. So they had to come up with something that's kind of doable while people can put these in. And what a lot of people forget, or what they don't notice, is most of your compliance regulations, they add that risk assessment piece, right? And that risk assessment piece gets glossed over or glazed over so many times that people don't understand how important that is. That risk assessment piece is the piece that, if you do it correctly, will let you know where or which areas from that compliance framework do you turn it up a notch, right? So, the majority of your information may be confidential or sensitive, or you have a lot of different systems or what have you, and you're saying this password required, this minimum is just not going to cut it. Or research has come out and now your compliance standards are outdated. So you need to make those corrections from a security standpoint. Always tell people, if you're going to be more secure, but and it's different than your compliance requirement, then you should be okay, because that's what they want you to do. But there are certain standards where it's like, it's got to be done this, or it's wrong. And if it's wrong, you're not compliant, you're not going to get this. So those are the ones where you really have to look at carefully. Case in point, perfect example of, from the federal side, you have to use, for encryption, you're using FIPS 140-2. So a lot of people were using OpenSSL. It had its FIPS accreditation or validation, and then there was an update. Well, the update wasn't validated, but it was improved, and it was the more secure version to use. So it was a matter of, federal entities recognizing, yes, this is more secure, so we're going to have to go through our process to accept it. But if you don't know that's a process, if you don't know that's there, then you're sitting there at an impasse talking about, I want to be secure, but I have to turn it down to be compliant. It just doesn't make any sense. So I'm totally with you on that. And I see PCI, like you're saying, PCI is improving with that, and some other regulations are, and they're really starting to understand those aspects of it in later controls.
Right.
Well, and also comes back to it. The compliance is a baseline. It's not meaning you're secure. It's the baseline to get people to be secure. Because, and I know, Stacey, you've run into this, is people want to just check the box. Let me just say it's done. And I'm not going to say anything else. I just need to pass this, and I just need a report so that I can get to the next day. And I don't want to do anything else. Well, then they're never going to be a secure environment then. They don't want it at that point. So if you can't get them to get beyond it and beyond a checkbox activity, you're never going to see anything else anyway. So it's all about how you educate them and get to understand how do you get to a secure environment so that you can be compliant at the same time.
Right.
That's interesting. Secure but not compliant. Just looking at the password. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of examples, but just look at the passwords for example. If I say, well, you can have anything. You don't have to have a number. You don't have to have a special. You don't have to have uppercase. Just 20 characters. Mathematically, that may be better than a 10 character upper lower number special, right? So
There are studies that support that.
yeah. So I can see that secure but not compliant aspect. So is there any leeway in these compliance frameworks for the auditor to go, you know what, I did the math, so probability wise, you're better than the compliance framework. So I'm going to pass you on the password.
Yeah, so there's leeway there. A lot of times within the compliance frameworks, you still have to write something up as a compensating control if you're doing like PCI or an alternative implementation. And then you have sort of that, for instance, the funny thing is, from a federal standpoint, you have your NIST your SP 800-53, and you have controls that contradict other NIST studies, and especially specifically passwords, right? So it's very interesting when you go someplace where they're like, okay, we're using this, but this also from this says I don't have to expire at this time, and I can use this length, and I don't have to use complexity. So those types of things.
Two-factor authentication,
So, right. So we have that. So then you look at that and you're like, okay, well, you're citing this study, you're doing this, and we'll just, because it's a compliance area, you have to write it up a certain way, whether it's a risk exception or a compensating control. So there is a process that you follow, that you do that. Also explaining it to the auditor. So not all auditors are built the same. So sometimes you have to really explain, and some of them will fight you tooth and nail. I mean, I had an example with a PCI. So I was a PCI QSA, and there was another, but I was, on team vendor. And then there was another QSA really asking the vendor to do things that just didn't make any sense. And they were putting so much on them. And you're talking about resources and level of effort and money that was outside of PCI compliance. But there's that area with when PCI, if the QSA won't sign off on it, then you're going to have a problem. So we had to have a meeting with just me and the other one, because nobody else wanted to meet with them. And so we met, and I was like, hey, started the meeting. I'm meeting with you because nobody wants to meet with you. I'm a straight shooter, right? So it's like, it's nothing personal, but let's have this conversation. And by the end of that, I think it was probably an hour-long conversation, and we ended up agreeing to, well, we didn't really agree to disagree. We just disagreed on the method, and probably like a day or two later, he quit the contract. So it worked out for the client, because now they were previously contractually obligated, but since the vendor wanted out of their contract, they were able to get another vendor that understood it a little better. So I don't like to do things like that, but I like to make sure that we have an understanding, and I can understand things from an auditor perspective, but I also understand it from a technical and security perspective as well. And that's when it really sort of gets under my skin, when they're focused on just what it says from a compliance standpoint, and you're ignoring security, because that is the nature of it.
Yeah. So what's worse, the vendor or the company that's not following PCI requirements, or the PCI auditor who comes in who can't see past the PCI wording and it has to be done my way or the highway, or it's a failure thing. Do you ever find somebody, and maybe you've run into this with other groups, maybe some of the big four folks, where they are unwilling to budge on exactly how to do something. You feel that the company has satisfied that requirement, but Big Four or whoever believes no, it needs to be done this way. I've
lost one fight. Really? I've lost one fight. It wasn't a bad one, but it was. It ended up being a checkbox thing. I hate checkboxes. So I mean, it wasn't worth the. You look at it, it's not worth it. It wasn't like a huge money pit or anything like that. It was a checkbox thing where it's like create a document that's not going to be used. And it goes back to when I say when I do things, I want to make sure everyone's using things that is usable information, that you're not just doing things to do things. But I mean, in the end of it, you need to get through your audit. So they didn't want to budge on one document. So I gave them a document that was not relative to the boundary whatsoever. And I told them it's not relative to the boundary, and they were okay with it. And they're like, that's fine. We're just checking this box. And I was like, this is dumb, but okay.
Well, I manifest it all the time. I literally have meetings every single day with auditors, and I go, why are you doing this? What is the reasoning? And they'll say, because my boss told me to do it.
Right.
And so then you have to go back to educating them and say, this is why you don't need to do it. And here's all the reasons why this is accomplishing your goal. And a lot of times you're getting auditors, especially in like the Big Four, not dogging the Big Four, because I came from that, but you're getting someone right out of college that's being told to do X, Y, and Z, and they're following the prior year work papers versus evolving with technology, evolving with the industry, evolving with standards, and looking at it from a different perspective. So as these organizations change and improve themselves, they have to go back to a team and explain that improvement and explain why it's better. What did it do to improve? And then you have to reteach the auditors because they're not learning this all the time. Some are, right? When you get a good auditor, you get a great, you hold on to them for life. But that's also why Stacey and I are in the position we are. We went out on our own because we wanted to help organizations, because we were seeing this. And we knew that organizations needed this help because they are living in a world where they have to reteach, re-explain, and they need someone to simplify it for them to get through the auditors. And sometimes they just don't even know how to speak to the auditor.
Right. Yep. And sometimes the auditors, they mean well. They're just trying to get things done a certain way, but it's that communication, right? You're coming to an environment that if it's your first time, once you become the repeat auditor, you kind of understand the environment. But if it's your first time coming in there, you just don't understand. And there's not enough time within an audit period to understand some of these very extremely complex systems. So that's why we're able to come in and sort of help out. We can speak the auditor, talk, and we can translate. And you say, they ask for this. I'm like, well, this is what they're talking, and this is what you do. And we can translate both sides. And a lot of times it's very appreciative. We're not coming in there with a chance. We're going to fight with your auditors and we want to get you through the process. That's what we want to do. But we don't want you to be asked to do things that don't make sense. We don't want you to have to change, like you talked about, up in processes altogether, just to meet a standard when there's another alternative that may be more beneficial to the organization. But you have to understand the environment for that, and you have to understand the audit framework. So those types of things is we just, like I said, we're trying to come in and help. We don't mind discussing things with auditors. Sometimes you get someone that's new, and they appreciate that it's all about how you approach it. We're not going to come in like we know more than you or what have you, or we don't want you going against what your boss told you to do. But we're going to ask the questions because that's what we owe our clients, is to ask the right questions. And if it's a meeting with your boss that we need to have, it's a meeting with your boss that we will have. So it's nothing new, right? We work with all levels.
Healthy way to push back.
Nice.
Yes.
Yep. Mr. Betcher, do you remember the time we were in our PCI audit and two people showed up and they were taking their laptops out of their brand new Dell cardboard boxes?
Yeah, they were peeling the little plastic off of their screen, right?
Like
for the first
day
time.
one, man. Day one. And I was like, oh, that doesn't inspire confidence. And we weren't no small ass
chops. Like, okay, this is going to be a breeze.
Yeah, we were no small ass company. I mean, and they sent us, noobs, and we're like, oh, great, okay, and I get it. They got to start somewhere, but Jesus,
not here, right? Yeah, I'm with you. I'm like, or at least do that in the car. Like, there's gonna be some bag. Put it in the bag.
You see, it was two of them. You were going to be the training and educators that day.
Pretty much, trial by fire.
Yeah, we were basically telling them, how to do things, and it was two of them, and both were brand new, and there was no team lead that was experienced or anything. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a great story that you guys will appreciate. And I don't know if I've ever told you this, Stacey. So I was visiting my parents for dinner, and my dad just came in from work. He was an IT director at some large company, and he just looked at me and goes, "I hate your kind." And I go, "What did I do wrong this week?" Like, which kind? He goes, "Auditors, none of you know anything. You're all a bunch of idiots." And I was like, "Okay, what did I do wrong now in my life?" He goes, "So let me tell you a story." And he goes, "I had these auditors ask for all of this documentation. And then I read their scripts, and all their scripts are wrong. So I rewrote their scripts for them so I could pull out the right information that they really needed. And then they lost all the information I gave, because this was like probably 15 years ago, and they were pumping everything on a CD or printing it out. And they lost the CDs. And he goes, "And you know what they did today? They sent me the intern in. And I lost it because they didn't have the ability to face me when they lost my information, and I had to teach them, and I had to rewrite all of it." The best part is, 10 years later, I went and worked with that team, and I realized when I walked in the room and I said, "Oh, it's all of you guys that my dad was talking about." And I didn't tell them, but I was like, "Oh, I go home, I go to dinner the next day, and I was like, so I met the team that you told me about 10 years ago. Yeah, they haven't changed."
Yep. Yeah, pastry chef. He's the pastry. Sorry about if I'm using the. I hope I'm using the right pronouns. It says, "I bet they're all grizzled veterans now." Yeah, that was about, I would say, 7-8 years ago. So they've gone through probably several hundred of these engagements now. So they're probably old hat at this now. So, but yeah, everybody has to start somewhere. It was just unfortunate that they had to start with us. But actually, it's probably good they started with us, because we didn't put up a huge fuss about them coming in. We were like, we did raise a question, but we didn't, I have heard people say, "I would have sent them back. I would have sent them home. I would have sent them away and said, come back with legitimate people." So we didn't actually do that. I think we were actually quite kind to them. I remember us and Bobby was quite nice to them. So anyway,
Well,
so
we were able to persuade them to give us a good score or whatnot, right? So if you didn't have anyone experienced, they would be they wouldn't know what was the right answer and the wrong answer on a lot of things. So when you give them a document, they're like, "Oh, okay, I've never seen a document like this before. This looks pretty good, I guess," right?
Yep. And it saved
Also
us
try rum cake for audits. I bring rum cake.
There you go. I was about to say we didn't have to give them that extra suitcase full of money, but I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's why we have the disclaimer on the podcast. Yeah.
Feed your auditors and don't let them leave the room. I've definitely done a few of those audits where we just did breakfast, lunch, and dinner in the room, and we just went from meeting to meeting. And by the end of the week, they're just like, "Okay, what? No more. I can't do any more information. I'm on overload. Stop." I go, "Well, we got 3 more meetings today. It's Friday. We can do this, right?"
Right. Yep. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's a slog, I would imagine, being especially for one of the big four. I mean, it is what it is. So, oh my goodness, we've managed to burn almost 2 hours. Well, I mean, I think we did about 10 minutes of welcome, but I mean, we did pretty good. So, we're very vendor agnostic here on the show. We don't. Yeah, it's about that time. Yeah, got to be getting. So we're vendor agnostic on the show. We don't, we do take sponsors, but Shannon, Stacey, you work for a consultancy that does something similar. I'd love for you to give your elevator pitch if before we go, about if somebody's looking for somebody to help with pre-audits or automation or what have you. Maybe you could tell people a little bit about what you do there.
Me or you first?
You, ma'am.
It's my turn. So we are QoS Consulting Solutions, and we help organizations do many things around audits, compliance, security, everything from assessing your environment and helping you find the right tools or identify the tools that you currently have in place to improve upon. So it's not necessarily recreating the wheel, but looking at what you have in place and improving it, or helping you identify the right tool that's going to make your environment more efficient. So we take our experience, our exposure, and we try to improve upon that. So we do everything from gap assessments, risk assessments, security, design, architect. So you name
Very
it,
cool.
we're there.
Yeah, and
Okay.
we work with most of your regulations, anything that has an IT security component, because I always tell people compliance is broad. You know, there's a compliance standard on peanut butter. So, while we don't know, we won't help you with that, but we can help you for anything that has an IT security component, which will fall within privacy sector as well. So you have your GDPR, your CCPAs, your ISO standards. You have FedRAMP, we have your DoD, RMF, we have HIPAA, we have Sarbanes-Oxley. So then you have SOC. So on the financial sector, so we can help you with those as well. And of course, PCI DSS. We partner with other companies. For instance, if it's something that requires a particular auditor designation like QSA, we partner with QSA companies when needed. Everything that we do, we can also train your organization on as well. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll bring people in for like staff augmentation. And it allows the organization to work within their own growth plan, right? So they can have, part-time staff that comes in just to do these functions that you're not seeing that's needed on a day-to-day basis. So just sort of do it as needed. It allows you to budget while you figure out what you want to do from a compliance standpoint. And then whenever you bring your new staff in, they work alongside our folks that have been there, and they're able to sort of come up to speed and just really train them on the organization. And then there's other organizations that reorg, and you'll get an engineer, and then now this engineer is going to be compliance or something like that or what have you, and they're still learning. Maybe they're learning GRC. We've had clients come in and say, can you help us? We now have a GRC team. Can you help our GRC program? So we will help build out information security programs as well. So yes, so we can help a lot of different aspects. And again, we're here to help. We want to have a little fun with it. We don't want compliance to be the dirty word, but we also want it to work with security. So while compliance and security are not the same, they should go hand in hand. They should work together.
Right on. Okay. You can tell she communicates for a living. I'm over here going like, yeah.
You can do the hair flip now.
I've been here for 15 years at least, so I understand GDPR, FedRAMP, all of those. The DITS cap, DICAP stuff used to be my bag, so I definitely understand. So you can also check them out at www.qosconsultingsolutions.com. I put a link in the stream chat, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. And your Twitter handle, I believe, is. Let me scroll up in the Zoom chat. Now Solutions QOS is on Twitter.
Right.
So, okay. And both of you are on LinkedIn as well. So there.
And ourselves. Yep.
Yep.
Cool. Cool. Yeah. Well, I
know people aren't.
yeah, I found Joe on LinkedIn because I put a post in LinkedIn. I was like, hey, we're going live. We're going to be talking to Shannon and Stacey. So boom. So yeah. Cool. Yeah. Thank you both for coming today. We're gonna finish up the show. If you want to hang around, that's fine. If you want to, drop off, that's fine too. But thank you both for your time. We'd love to have you both back on. And about anything, if you come up with a blog post or you have some interesting, more stories from the trenches, we'd love to have you on because, Twitch is Twitch, and there's a lot of folks out there that would love to hear some, Schadenfreude about. Thank God that's not my company. Well,
thank you, Brian's plural, for having us. This has been really great.
Sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. No problem.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Glad
All right.
we have that mutual friend that told us we need to talk about that thing.
Hey, yeah, you know what? I'm glad he did that. And, if he ever decides to vague post me again, I will, I'll make sure I'll just reach out to you directly and just, go with it. So, yeah.
There's a Lauryn Hill song that can go along with that as well.
There you go. Right on. All right. So, Mr. Betcher, tell us a little bit about how people can find you and what you do with LogMD.
What do I do with LogMD? Well, I wrote a program that helps you figure out how to do Windows logging better. I'm sure there's some compliance requirements around that, right? To record the stuff and the things, right. And it also helps you with proving, like for example, if you get ransomware, HIPAA says that unless you can prove that you didn't lose any data, then that's a breach, right? So it helps you to do those things, right? So that will put you in a better position when it comes to compliance. And so that's my tool, along with Michael Goff, and we are the purveyors of LogMD, and you can find it at log-md.com.
Excellent. All right. And of course, everybody's been seeing your Twitter handle going across the screen on Twitter, on Twitch. So you're Betcher Pwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. Miss Berlin, who will be back hopefully next weekend. I'd like to do a show with her next weekend, even though we'll probably use this as a 1 and a 2-parter, just to get her into the Twitch and to introduce her to the world. You can find her at InfoSystir, INFOSYSTIR. You can follow the podcast at Breaksec, BRAKESEC, and I am on Twitter at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. Just for everybody who's listening to the audio podcast, if you've come this far, thank you, because this is usually where everybody probably shuts off on the audio podcast, because we tend to, introduce ourselves or go out. The Twitch stream is going to be around for the foreseeable future, and we're going to do a lot of events on it. I have a mentee. His name is AJ. He is working as a paramedic EMT in the Chicago area and is looking to take his master's degree when he gets out in December of this year and pivot into InfoSec. And he has asked me, and I found him through the Black Girls Hack Slack, which is one of the organizations that our umbrella corporation, the InfoSec Education Foundation, has set up scholarships to help people get vouchers for Security Plus certifications and help to get to conferences so that everybody can be exposed to InfoSec. Everybody should be able to be exposed to InfoSec if they so choose. So AJ and myself are going to have some regular vignettes here on the Twitch, going through Try Hack Me. We're going to go through some of the Burp Suite Academy stuff. One of our content creators, Wimmery, is already doing some of those on her own channel. If you go to twitch.tv/Wimmery, WHIMMERY. You can go and check out what she's been doing over there. She also does some gaming, like most Twitch folk, but she also does Burp Suite Academy stuff. And so we're going to go through some Try Hack Me. We're gonna get some skills. We're gonna up skills. So if you are interested in doing some Try Hack Me or Pen Tester Labs or VulnHub or anything, if you have an idea on things that we can do on here, CTFs, over the wire, under the wire stuff, if you want to do those old school war games, if you just want to sit around and do regex golf like what Mr. Betcher showed me, alf.nu, I think is alf.nu, which is regex golf. It's infuriating. I will tell you right now, it is awful. But you will learn how to do regexes pretty easily with that by the time you're done. So, but if you have ideas on what we can do and spend a couple hours every week doing it, my next month of March is going to be doing at least an hour a day of content, whether it be me reading the news and talking about various facets of things, or going through the attack, defend, and I think MITRE just came out with a new framework called Engage. So if you are interested in, discussing some of that, consider this to be an educational font of the place to be. If you're looking to upscale or you're just looking to hang out and talk about all things security, we would definitely love to do that. So tell your friends, because we want to grow the community and to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to get involved. We're looking to expand our relationship with Black Girls Hack, if at all possible, and with other groups that are InfoSec related or security related, or DevOps and programming and PM related. So we're definitely pushing. We're definitely pushing an education agenda here, which seems to be in short supply on Twitch. A lot of it is, talking about gaming and esports. There's really not a lot here going on with education-wise for security. So we're definitely very niche, but we hope to have some fun doing it too. So tell your friends, push us out on all your social media platforms. Listen to the podcast, tell your people about the podcast, upvote us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, elsewhere, and LinkedIn, because we sometimes neglect LinkedIn, but we really appreciate the help, and we just hit affiliate status because of yesterday's Sunflower Con, which I don't know is how big a deal that is. I actually have to read more into it. But it sounds like we'll be somewhat self-sustaining with all of the revenue that we get from this. So do appreciate everybody for helping out with that. We do thank our Patreon donors, the tip jar that you see on the crawl. If you go to breaksec.com/BDS Patreon, you can help donate some money to the tip jar, which will go to just maintenance and upkeep, the Zoom we use, domain hosting, libsyn for distribution, and helping out just time and effort of me and Mr. Betcher, Ms. Berlin, and all of our moderators in our Slack, making community work and making everything work. So hope you'll find time to make some love there, either by educating and communicating us to your friends and colleagues, or giving us a little something in the tip jar. So appreciate everybody for that.